Hey guys, welcome back to another wave shooter tutorial. We are at tutorial number 11, and in this tutorial we are going to be setting it up so we have different colored of blood. So the blood will be in different colors when you kill the corresponding enemy. So if you kill a red enemy, the blood will be red, and if you kill a yellow enemy, the blood will be yellow. Because in our current implementation, we did not have that. We actually just only had the red. So we're going to be fixing that, and we're going to be setting up a power-up system that will allow the player to shoot faster when he grabs the green little power up for a little bit of time. So let's get right into it. Okay, so just open up your blood particle scene. I've already set the color to white, so just make sure you set your color to white, and that will make it easier so we can actually set the colors correctly when we have the different colored enemies. So the thing with this solution, let's go into our enemy core script where we actually instance blood. The thing with our solution is we can't just set the color of the blood straight to the enemy color, because if you have enemies above that blood, it's going to be very hard to differentiate which are enemies and which are blood because there's no outlines. So I've come up with a solution for this that should be relatively simple. We do blood particles instance dot color, actually dot modulate, because that's the color of it. It's actually modulate. If you do color like this instead of modulate, this just generates a color that can be used in a modulate. If you just write color though, it's not going to actually set that color of the sprite. I hope that makes sense. Color is just more of a data type. Modulate actually sets the color of the current sprite or whatever you're changing. So we're going to be doing color, but we're going to have to do dot from HSV, which is hue, saturation, and value. So hue will basically change the color. So if you had like red, you can change it to green. Saturation makes it so it gets darker, and value will make it so it kind of fades out to white. What we're going to be using is our current color, because we have our onReady variable that sets it to modulate. So we just use current color. From this color data type, you can just do color.h and get the hue value of that color. So it's basically going to be the same as doing current color.h, which gets the hue of our current color. Then we can do, for the saturation, I found 0.75 as a good value. Hue and saturation, all these values will actually go from 0 to 1. It's usually 0 to 255. Godot likes to use 0 to 1. So 0.75 will make it a bit darker, and value will just leave at current color.v. And you can see now that we have our script setting up our color and basically parsing it all together, except for the value color, which should make it a bit darker so you can differentiate the blood from the enemies. Again, I'm not an expert at color, so if I say anything incorrect, you can correct me in the comments. You can go back to your arena scene, hit the play button. So we got a yellow enemy coming in. I shoot him, and look, we got blood coming out. Actually, this isn't darker. I actually set it a bit lighter. So again, that was kind of my bad, but I think that works just fine. I actually like the lighter blood a lot better. But when I was talking about the color values before, I now realized that I switched saturation and value. So saturation will make it fade to white, and value will actually make it darker. So if you want a darker blood, you can change this value right here. For now, I like changing the saturation. We could save that, and we have enemy blood working, so it should work with every enemy that you set up, and it should all be modular, so whenever you set it up, you don't have to change any code to get the color working. Now we want power-ups into the game, so I have a solution. So we can't just use our enemy spawn system for our power-up spawn system, because if you remember, the enemies actually spawn outside the screen, whereas you want power-ups spawning in the screen so you can actually see them. So we're going to have to make a new spawning system just for the power-ups. We'll be reusing lots of the code from the enemy spawning. First, before we set up the power-up spawning, let's actually set up our base power-up scene. So we're going to click the plus button, add a new scene. I'm going to do an other node, and this is going to be a sprite. And I'm just going to be using our same square sprite, which basically every sprite in the game is going to be the square. Unless it's blood, then it can be circle. But it's basically just a lot of placeholder art that we're using here. So I'm actually going to rotate this. Let's say -45. And you have a different look for these power-ups because now they're rotated, and so the player should be able to see the power-ups and be able to differentiate them against enemies or bullets. Here we go, we got our power-up, and you can set the color of the power-up to however you want. I'm going to set it to like a light green. I like that. And there you go, you got our power-up in. I'm going to rename the sprite, and we're going to call this. So my idea for this power up is it's going to make it so the player shoots faster. So I'm just going to say power up reload. There we go. Well, now that we have a sprite in, we need to actually have collision detection, because right now, even if we wanted to hit collisions, we would not actually be able to tell if we are colliding with it. So we are going to be adding an area 2D, and under this area 2D, we are going to be adding a collision shape 2D. I'm going to be setting this shape to a rectangle shape. And you can see it's all nice, and the collision shape actually rotates with it because it's inheriting this rotation's degree property in the sprite. I'm going to turn on use pixel snap, and I'm just going to try to get it somewhat. There you go. You have a collision shape on top. I'm going to hide the collision shape so I don't see it. And we can rename this area 2D to hitbox. So now we're going to be adding a script to our power up reload, and I'm going to hit create. And we can remove all of this placeholder stuff. I'm going to go back into 2D scene, select the hitbox. We're going to go over to the node signals. I'm going to connect area entered back to the power up reload script. We need to make sure that we know what our player is when we enter it. So I'm going to go back to the player hitbox. I'm going to go to groups, and you see we won't be able to detect if it's a player because we don't have a player group assigned to that hitbox. So I'm just going to be setting player and add that to the player hitbox. Remember, you have to have the hitbox selected and add the group so it can actually detect correctly. Because if you added it on top and it was the player that you added the group, it won't be able to see it. Okay, so now we can go back into our script and we can check, instead of this pass, we can do if area dot is in group, and I'm just going to write player, because that's the same name of the group that we set before. Then we can do queue free for now. It's not going to do anything for now. We'll save it, but you can see we can't actually modify the player shooting speed because the player doesn't have that as a variable, and we'll need a variable so we can actually modify it on the fly while the game is running. So I'm going to be setting up another variable. I'm going to call this shoot speed. And let's see where actual shoot speed is. Oh, let's go reload speed. I'm actually going to call this reload speed as the variable. And it looks like we have it set to 0.1. So we can just set that to 0.1. And we have the reload speed in. Now we need to actually have it in action. So go down in our player script. And when the reload speed times out, we're just going to do $reload speed dot wait time equals reload speed. That way it's actually setting up its wait time equal to the reload speed. But what's going to happen is once we set our speed back to a faster speed like 0.05, and if we want to set it back, it's not going to know what the default reload value was. So what we can do is we can write var default reload back to reload speed. So basically default reload speed is 0.1. So you might not need this variable if you're going to have different weapons. Like instead of actually doing a power up, you could just do a weapon that drops. Then you just basically keep that reload speed and change it from weapon to weapon. But for now, for this project, I'm just going to be setting up a reload speed default variable. So we can save this and we can go back to our power up reload. Now when we collide with our player, we want to do area dot get parent. The reason why we use area dot get parent is if you go into the scene tree, it's going to be detecting the collision detection on this hitbox, but it doesn't contain our script. You have to go one node up in the scene tree, which is the parent node of the hitbox, which then has our script that we need to change those variables. So we're going to do area dot get parent dot, and we're going to be getting our reload speed variable. Dot reload speed equals, we'll just set reload speed to 0.05, which will be twice as fast as what we currently have. But right now it's going to permanently set their reload speeds. We want to have a cooldown. So once we set the reload speed, there needs to be a timer that cancels, that will set that back. So we're going to be doing this in the player. We're going to add another timer. I'm going to call this timer Powerup Cooldown, and just set one shot the true on that timer so it doesn't keep going once it's played. And that's all we need. We can save it. You could just leave it at 1 wait time. Now, if we go back to our Powerup reload script, then we can actually set a area.getParents. Let's say get node, and we're going to be getting our Powerup cooldown. I'm going to copy this, paste that in, and we're going to set .wait time equals. I'll set that to, we'll just have it at a 1 second, a default. And you're probably saying you probably don't need this line because we already have the timer set to 1 second. But let's say you want to have different cooldowns on each power up. This is going to allow us to have different cooldowns. I'm also going to do area.getParents.getNode, Powerup cooldown. We're doing the same thing, and we're going to tell it .start. That way, the Powerup cooldown actually gets started, and this gets queue freed. That's why we can't have a timer in the Powerup, because the Powerup gets destroyed, so that timer would never actually go off. So you can save that, and in our player, we need to get our Powerup cooldown, and I'm just going to connect the signal timeout back to the current player. Now when this goes off, I'm going to have to set our reload speed back to its current value. So let's say we had multiple power-ups. We already have our reload speed power-up. What if we had a damage power-up? Well, as soon as this goes off, we set all of our values back to default, and if we collect another power-up within that same time frame, it's not going to do anything because it's going to get reset. So how do we fix that? Well, we're going to be using an array for that. So I'm going to be setting up another variable, and we're going to call this Powerup reset. And we're just going to be setting up this array as empty. There's going to be nothing in this array. And so now we have our Powerup reset array. And now we can go back to our Powerup reload, and we have to tell the player we want to set this array value to our Powerup reload because that's the only value we want to get reset when the player's cooldown goes off. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to say area.getParents. And we're going to be using this same array value right here, Powerup reset. We're going to be saying Powerup reset dot append, and we're going to be adding a string, and we're going to say this Powerup reload. So what append does is it adds this value to the end of the array, and it honestly doesn't matter where this value is in the array because we're going to be searching the entire array to see if we have it. So now we can go back in our player script and we can say if Powerup reset dot find, and we find the value that we set over here, which is Powerup reload. Copy this, and we'll paste that in there. So if we find this value is not equal to null, meaning it exists, then we can say that we want to reset our reload speed. So we just do reload speed equals default reload speed, which is what we set up before, which will set it back to the last reload speed that it was set at when the game started. So now this will only make sure if we have multiple power-ups that only one of the variables actually get reset. So this will make sure that once I grab a reload speed power-up, if I try to grab a damage power-up right after, it doesn't get reset too early. And we need to set Powerup reset dot find. No, we need to do dot erase Powerup reload, which means that this value will not get reset anymore if we grab another power up. So it's a bit confusing using arrays, but I hope you guys kind of get the gist once we set up multiple power ups. And now we have the system in place. So let's go into our arena script. We're spawning enemies, and let's make another export array packed scene, and we'll call this variable power ups. And in this arena, we're actually going to be setting up another timer, which is just going to be in the scene tree. And we're going to say this Powerup spawn timer. And we could set Powerup spawn, what do you guys think? Every 5 seconds spawns a Powerup. I think that sounds good. We'll do auto start, and we'll connect the timeouts back to the arena. So we're basically going to be using lots of the same code from the enemy. Let's actually copy this enemy number thing that we're doing up here. And we can paste that down here, and I could say, instead of enemy number, I can write power up number. We're saying power up number to random range 0 to power ups dot size -1. So now we've picked out the power up that we're using, the index of that, and now we want to instance it. So we can do global dot instance node power ups, and we can write power up number. So we're instancing that power up now, and then we need to set the position. So the position we want is going to be vector2 random range is our x value from 0. And I'm going to show you guys in our project settings. Go down to window, and we're going to be using our width. So 0 to 640 to 640. For our y value, let's put comma here, and we'll do random range 0, and then we're going to be using our height of our window, which is 360 for me, and we do 360. So now it's going to be instancing it anywhere on the screen, because these are all the values that are on the screen. From in between 0 and 640 is on the screen, and 0 to 360 is on the screen. Now we want to just set ourselves as our parent, and you also need another parenthesis there to finish off the vector2, and this doesn't need to be there. So we're picking out a power up number, and we're instancing that power up that corresponds with that number at values in between the top of the screen all the way to the rightest part of the screen, and then from the top of the screen all the way to the bottom of the screen. And that will make it so it spawns a power up anywhere on the screen, and you will be able to see it. And we will be the parents of that power up. So now we can save that, and that should all be working once we go into our arena and we set our power ups. Let's set size to 1, and I'm just going to be dragging power up reload as the 0 value. So I'm going to save, and you can see, there you go, you have a power up that spawns. So I'm going to be shooting just to show that it will shoot faster. And you can see it shot faster just for a second. And I'm going to set the power up spawn, I'm going to set that to 10 seconds. I think every 5 seconds is a bit too much. You can see you're shooting faster every time you grab them. So let's fix our power up spawn timer. Let's set that to 10 and see how that is. Okay, we got one down here. I'll just shoot just to show how much it gets faster for a couple seconds. Maybe we could set the power up duration a bit longer too. I think that would be better. So it's just some minor adjustments, but I'm going to set our wait time to like 2 seconds. And then I want to also spawn power ups every 15 seconds. Now we got our power up, basic power up system working, but we want to make this expandable just like we did with our enemies with the inherited scenes and stuff. And so usually when we are setting up I'm going to rename power up reload, this script right here, and we're just going to call it power up, because we're about to make this script universal to work with all power ups. And I can close this old one, and now we're just in powerup.gd. So for these values, we're going to just use the export to change these values. So let's say export, and let's do string var, and then we're going to call this variable player variable modify. And now we're going to be setting up a couple more export variables. We'll do export float var player variable set. And so now we're going to be incorporating this into setting our player variable and setting this our end value to that player variable. So I'm going to set player variable set to here, and instead of just doing dot reload speed, we can do dot set, and I can write player variable modify comma player variable set. So what this does is it takes 2 arguments. It takes this player variable modify string, which will get the string, and it'll actually find the variable that uses that is exactly named just like the string. So if I named this export variable modify in the editor right here, if I name this exactly to our reload speed variable, Let's do that right now. Let's go into our power up reload, set player variable modify. We're setting that to reload speed, and go back to our power up script. What this is gonna do is it's gonna find that reload speed variable in our player using the string, and it's gonna set that value to this other variable that we have called player variable set. So it's setting the reload speed back to this value, which we want is 0.05, exactly the same. And we're also going to be setting another export float variable. I'm going to say this is going to be for our wait time variable, and I'm just going to say power up cooldown, and we'll set that to power up cooldown. I'm just going to set to 2 by default. And so that will set power up cooldown to our actual corresponding power up cooldown. And we did do append power up reload right here. We set that as a string, but that's just more work trying to make another export string just to get the name of it. We can just use the native name up here because it's the exact same as the variable we set in here and the one that the player's checking for. So instead of just doing power up reload, we can say append name, which will return the string of our name. And that way we just set our name, and then the player will have to find that corresponding name. And so that just makes it a lot easier when setting up these multiple power ups. So we could save everything and we'll run the arena, and everything should run exactly the same as we had before. And you see we have a power up that spawned. I grab it, and you can see it's shooting the exact same as it was before. Everything reacts the exact same. Reload speed changes, and all it is it's a universal script now that we can set these values, and it works on any power up. So this is awesome because now we're able to make a damage power up. But first we have to set up the damage variable in our player. So we'll be setting up another variable, and we're going to call this damage. I'll just set it to 1, and I'll set up another variable called default damage, and we can just set that to damage. When the enemy gets hit, we'll have to change a couple of things because the enemy automatically subtracts 1 health no matter what from that bullet. But it won't be able to see our damage variable because our damage variable is in our player. So when we instance a bullet, we're going to be we'll set that to a variable. We'll say bullet instance. That way we can set a variable in the bullet instance. Bullet instance dot damage equals, and we could set that to our damage variable, which will set that same damage to our damage, which then in our bullet we'll have to change the code a bit too. So I'm just going to go to our bullet.gd. I'm going to set another variable, and we'll call it damage. So now this will set to the player's damage, which then in our enemy core, our enemy damager is going to be our bullet right here. It's colliding with our enemy damager. And now instead of saying HP minus equals 1, we can do HP minus equals, we have to do area.getParent. Remember, we can't just say area dot and then give the variable because the area doesn't have the script. So we have to do area.getParent.damage, which is getting our bullet damage from right here, which was then set from our player when the player shoots the bullet. That way, the variable is kind of tossed around, but it's able to see it now, and the enemy can subtract based on the player's actual damage variable right here. Now that we set that up in our system, we can now go up to in our power up reload. So now we can do scene inherited scene off of power up reload. So now we can select our power up reload.tscn, open, it makes a duplicate that's inheriting from the original power up reload. We can rename this to power up damage, and we could set this color to more of like a pink color like that. For a player variable modify, we can say damage, which is the variable we're modifying, and we're going to be setting our damage to 2, double the damage we have before, and we'll just leave the cooldown at 1. So now I could save that, and we have power up damage. So you see how easy that was to just set up the power up? That's what I like when we set up a system that's letting us use and reuse the same code, but also make it so it's expandable. It just took some setting up of variables on the player side. So now we have to go here and we can say else if powerup reset.find, and we can say powerup damage is not equal to null. Damage equals default damage, and we could say powerup reset.erase powerup damage. And you could even automate this right here, because this is actually, it's basically like the exact same thing, just using different variables. And so even if you wanted to, we can automate this. I'm just going to leave it here for now. And you can see now we have a damage power up. We could just go in our arena, increase the size to 2. And I can drag in my power up damage and drop that there. And we could play the game. And now you're going to have a half a chance of dropping a normal power up reload. And we're going to have half of a chance of dropping a power up damage. So now we have a reload. Nice shooting faster now. Got another reload coming in. Oh, and you can see there's damage power up right here. And if I grab that, I am now doing a lot more damage to them. One more thing before we end this tutorial. Let's make it so the power-ups look nicer when they spawn in, because they just kind of appear. And so we're just going to be adding an animation player. And in this animation player, you can click this animation button. We'll make a new one. We'll call this appear. So now in this animation, we can say, okay, let's modify the scale of it. We'll set scale to 0, 0, and I can insert the key by hitting this key button, press create. I'm at the 0 frame right now. And if I go up to 0.1, and then I set our scale to 1, 1, now you can see when I play it back, it goes up. And we can make this animation a little bit better by, I'm going to be setting up my snapping right here. There's a snap right here. It's set to 0.1. I'm going to set that to 0.05. That way I can make some more fine adjustments. And right here, I'm just going to set it to 1.1, 1.1, and then I'm going to set it back to 1, 1, the next at 0.2. So you can see it kind of has a bounce to it when it goes in. Fades in, and it looks really nice. I'm going to be setting the time right here to 0.2. That way it ends right here. And what else? I'm going to be setting cubic to cubic interpolation. That way it just kind of, it's more of a smooth, it's kind of like an ease curve. To each of the animation keys, it kind of adds a more of an easing curve. And I think it just looks nicer. But there you go. You got fade, appear animation. There's an A right here that will make it autoplay. And so when it's created, it will automatically play this animation. So you want to make sure when we end this scene, before we save the scene, you want to move this track right here all the way back to 0. That way, when it starts, it will actually be completely shrink, so you won't be able to see it. So I can close that scene. Now we have it saved. And you can see now that I saved that one reload, our damage power up will have it applied to it as well. This is the nice thing of having these inherited scenes, is I just need to do it in one, and I don't have to do it in all the power ups, because you can imagine if I made 10 power ups, it would take forever to get those all synced up. So just doing this inheritance works really well. So just make sure you have the track key at 0, and we can run it. And you can see they're fading in. Looks really nice. Man, it looks so much better than having them appear. And that simple animation player just does a lot. And especially adding that little bounce to it when it fades in, I think looks really nice. Technically, it's not fading in. It's more like scaling in. But, you know, it's the same thing. You have it so you can easily set it up and do whatever you need and add content to the game. In next tutorial, we will be setting it up so the blood will actually fade out. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one.